Good afternoon. Welcome to this meetup organized by Swift Barcelona that we are hosting today here at Glovo. So welcome everyone. Let me present myself. I'm Marcel Arbó, Senior Engineering Manager here at Glovo. I work in the platform Thrive and overlooking mobile and web platform teams. And before we go to the talk, let me give you some data about Glovo. So Glovo is a leading tech platform connecting customers, business, and couriers, offering fast multi-category on-demand services from restaurant, grocers, supermarkets to high-street retail stores. What's our mission? We are building the largest marketplace in your city to give you access to anything in minutes. Some numbers. So we were founded in 2015. So this means that this year we achieved a 10 years anniversary. We are over 22 countries, 3 million users, 150K partners, 120K couriers, 3K employees, and our average age is 31. Pretty cool, right? But I wanted to highlight here that this will not be possible without the people and the talent that we have at Glovo and that we are looking for. So that's why we are building a talent house. So if you would like to be part of it, be ready to expect the unexpected, expect to grow, be ready to be fun, expect to be challenged, and expect to get uncomfortable. Everything we do is guided by our Glovo values: Glovo ownership, high bar, good vibes, gas, stay humble, and deep dive. Our tech team, some numbers. How big is technology in Glovo? We are 4 tribes, over 45 teams, 450 employees. And since today we are talking about iOS topics, we get some snapshot of the last 30 days, last month. We have over 42 authors that contributed to more than 550 merge pull requests. And fun fact, we had more deletions than additions. So we are doing some refactors and cleaning some legacy code that we really care about. Also talking about our CI, over these 500 merges, our average CI time was 14 minutes. If you have been here before, we talk about also how we improved our CI over the past years. We never stop looking into it, especially in the mobile platform team. And yeah, we care about developer experience at Glovo in general. But our tech ecosystem is much bigger. As you may know, we are part of Delivery Hero Group. So we have access to more than 53,000 heroes globally as part of the age that it's present around the world. And we are happy that today you are going to get a taste of it. Last but not least, yes, we are hiring. We have some open roles, especially staff and senior iOS engineer, together with some backend positions. If you want to get a scan on the QR, feel free to do so. At the end, we're also going to show it in case someone is interested. And important to mention also, we also have a meetup group, Glovo Tech Talks. We organize frequent events here, a part of hosting other events. We talk about data, AI, engineering in general. So feel free to subscribe so you will get updates from us. And with that, Swift Barcelona, the stage is yours.
How you doing? Welcome back again to another Swift Barcelona. It's been a long time. So thank you again for hanging around and keeping with us. So I'm really, really happy that we have this space again. We've been here a few times at Glovo. I think it's like once a year. And so I'm trying to reboot the Swift Barcelona. So I have some more events lined up also next month. And January, February, March, there's plenty more in the pipeline. So please keep watch out for those emails coming, announcements for events. There's more coming. As for today, we have a very special guest and a friend who has been for a number of years working on something that is really fundamental to improving the iOS lives for developers, working with their CI and working far more efficiently, helping clear away some of the pains like merges and so on. So I want to introduce Pedro Piñeda of Tuist.
Hello. Yes. I'll try to do pair programming with a microphone with an orthopedic device on my leg. It's gonna be a lot of things, but I'll try. I think I'm supposed to share the screen. I think I sent you a request to share the screen. I think you need to accept it. Yes, finally. And I did something new this time. I coded the slides using HTML, CSS. Very cool. I won't talk about that, but if you're interested, Cloud Code is amazing once you have Markdown for your slides. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for organizing this and for the invitation, Ronan. I think it took us at least a year to make this happen. I finally, with the surgery that I had in Barcelona, I have to go to Barcelona very regularly, which I don't mind because I hate the weather in Berlin. So it's fine. I just come and enjoy the nice weather. I'm based in Berlin, although I'm from the south of Spain, this region called Murcia. I don't use it a lot because when I say it in Germany, people look at me like Murcia, but then you say Alicante and then they know. I used to be, I call myself builder. I like building a lot. I built Tuist years ago, and then a couple of years ago, we decided to turn the whole thing into a business. And this is a very interesting topic that I could talk about in the future. These days, I do a bit of everything: coding, support, sales, marketing, yeah, everything. But what I like still the most is coding. And it happened for me that I like something that not many people like, which is you go into understanding Xcode's tooling and the internals and the proprietary formats that Apple puts out there, and you make things better for developers. And yeah, this is what I've been doing for the past years. Today, I would like to cover something that if you take notes, it might get some of you a promotion because there are so many things that you can do in your setup that would optimize the day-to-day of developers. And not many people talk about these things. When you think of optimizing, companies or leaders usually think about more people, faster machines. But I think before you make things faster, you can make things smarter, and you can look at your projects and your setup, and there are so many things that you can optimize. I organize those things in two groups. The things that happen in development and the things that happen in integration. By integration, I mean continuous integration. We'll talk about frequent merge conflicts, clean builds, and what that means in derived data, architecture and build performance, non-determinism. And then on CI, we'll talk about some infrastructure constraints, caching strategies, some of the remote caching solutions that you can use. And we'll talk about how to optimize tests. The slides are up there. That's my Twitter or X and my email. You can email me. I like to talk a lot, so don't be afraid. So let's talk about development. And this is one that is very common, and this is the reason why we started working on Tuist, and is the frequent Git conflicts. I built this library for parsing Xcode projects so I could understand the format internally. And this happens because every time you add or remove a file to the project, there is a one-line change in the PBX proj. So if people are changing that file all the time, which they are because they're adding and removing files, you get this conflict. What we did in Tuist was instead of using that format, we created like a DSL for you to describe the project. And instead of having a one reference per file, you can have a glob syntax where you say include everything in the sources. That's how Tuist was born. That's how Xcode was born. And I believe this is the reason why many people use Swift SPM these days as a project manager, because it has the same idea. put everything under sources. The thing that like one thing that you can do if you don't want to use any of those tools is, of course, you can do smaller PRs, but that doesn't really improve much because, like, at the end of the day, people in every PR is adding and removing files, so you will always have conflicts in your projects. If you don't want to use the Swift SPM option or Tuist, I should be selling Tuist, but I'm not that big of a, I don't like, I mean, I have to sell, but I don't want to put Tuist everywhere. Apple finally decided that this was something that they should solve, and they introduced what they call buildable folders. Have you heard of that? Internally, they are called synchronized groups in the PBX project format. And the idea is, instead of having one reference per file, you have a reference to a folder, and then it includes everything inside that folder. And the way you opt into that is very simple. You go to any folder in your project, right-click, and then you say convert to folder. And then you go from, let's say one folder has 100 files, 100 lines in the PBX project. You go to something like 1 line. And I don't think you can see, but there is a dot in the slide, which is an indication for me that I should do a demo here. I'm going to show you that so that you can visualize what I mean by 1 line. Oh yeah, this is better. No, yes. So I'm going to create a project. I'm sure all of you have gone through this before. I'm going to call it NS Barcelona. I'm going to create it in, I think downloads is fine. I don't see with the Zoom window. Yeah, here you go. Perfect. And then I'm going to open this project and in a different editor, not Xcode. I like to use this one called set. NS Barcelona. And by default, like in the latest Xcode version, you get buildable folders or synchronized groups. You search for synchronized groups. This is what you get. It says there is a folder called NS Barcelona. Just include everything inside. So if you add a resource to the folder, it will be a resource in the target. If you add sources, it will be used as a source. So if I create another folder, I can come here and do, for example, I think I could do the same through Xcode UI as well. But and then I come here. It tells me if I want to create groups or folders. I don't know why the default is groups. It doesn't make sense. But you see the difference is the color of the folder. Blue is the synchronized version. The gray one is the non-synchronized. And every time I add a file, there will be a change here. I can add a file called XXX. I'm gonna commit everything so that you see the changes. And then if I add another file, I can call it something else. Like every time I do changes, we can see that it's constantly, I should see the diff here. Like it will be basically anytime I add something, remove something, you see this thing changing. But if I revert that, and I try to add a file to the synchronized group, there's no git diff. There is a file that I added and a bunch of other files, but there is no change in the PBX project file. This is something that is super easy to adopt, and it really takes you to go to the Xcode project, right-click, and turn the whole thing into a buildable folder. This is also something useful for agents, and I'll talk about that later. By agent, I mean coding agents. Then the other thing, conflicts can happen in PBX project, but it can also happen in files that people are constantly modifying. I don't know, there is some kind of monolith, not app delegate because that's not a thing anymore, but like some localized strings, they are always in the same file. And this is something that you can easily identify, like all this information about which files are modified and with which frequency. You can run this git command, you get the output from the top to the bottom. If you see there's one file that is frequently modified, this is a good candidate for you to split up into smaller files. This is not an Xcode project thing. It's more of a how you organize your code kind of thing, and it's very simple to do. If you export these files, like what you should do is to take them and like split them into smaller pieces. Then I think we need to talk about something that still happens a lot. And again, like Apple is solving these things. It's just that it takes some time for them to solve them. How many of you clean bills when you see an error in Xcode that you don't understand? Like it's very common, like and it's not really your fault. Like it's really the solution is cleaning, because the way derived data work is that every project gets this derived data folder whose name is the name of the project, and then some hash that they calculate. And when you're building things, everything is dumped into that folder. And sometimes your projects work not because they are properly well configured. They work because accidentally some file was put there, and then some other task in the process is able to find it, and then the whole thing works until the things don't build in the right order, and you are fucked because it won't be able to find the thing. And I believe, I don't know because I don't know the internals of Xcode, when people are unable to run previews and a bunch of other features that rely on building the build graph, they're all failing because of derived data. So derived data and the way it's designed is causing all these issues. And Apple knows about it and they are trying to solve it. So the way it works is for every file that needs to be compiled, they calculate, they take the path of the file and they use that to look up information inside derived data. And this is something that was proven not to be ideal because you cannot reuse the outputs. That's one of the things. And the other one is what I described, like you start putting things there and accidentally things just work. And Apple is starting to move to a different model where instead of using the file path, it uses the hash of the inputs and the outputs, and it's able to basically store something using this hash. I really like Bazel. Bazel is ahead of Xcode in that sense. In their documentation, they talk about there is the actual dependencies and there is the declared dependencies. So you can link a dependency that is not explicitly declared, and that's fine. Xcode won't complain. But in the long term, this is a bad idea because sooner or later, you'll face errors. So the way you fix it is you need to be very hygienic with the graph, but this is tricky because it's very easy that someone says import something, and the something is imported and linked and the app runs. Apparently everything is fine, but it's really not. So it's very important that dependencies are explicit and there are no circular dependencies. This is tricky because you need to analyze your code statically, see what is being imported. You need to analyze the graph of your project and then see what depends on what, the declared dependencies, and see if the actual dependencies and the declared dependencies match. If they don't, then what you should do is basically not let that code be merged. At Tuist, we realized this was a very important thing for users, so we built that into our command. If you're using generated projects, you can run this command and it tells you, hey, you are trying to import this module from this source file and it's not declared. You cannot do this. And I say that Xcode is trying to solve this, and Xcode 26 is the first version that makes this official. I don't think the name is, I think it's a good name because of what it enables, but that flag called compilation cache enable caching could have been called I don't like move away from derived data equal true, kind of, or equal yes. What they do is they calculate hashes. So every build task knows its inputs. It calculates the hashes and it goes to this compiled cache directory in the system, and it tries to look up if there is an output with the same hash from a previous build. That makes things more reliable, first, and second, and I think this is very important in the world of agents. You can have multiple copies of the same project. They will all be accessing the same cache. And I think I will talk about that later, but in the context of agents, this is amazing. So we'll try to enable it and you will see it, how it works. See if I can remember the name. So we can go to the project that we have. I think it should compile. We can go to the build settings. I can add that you need to add that to every single target, so we can add it to a project, and it will inherit the values. It's not recognized or official, so you need to add like a custom user-defined setting. And let's see if I remember the name. Compilation cache, enable caching, compilation cache, enable caching. And before I do that, I want to show you, might set somewhere. Yeah, maybe that one is official. There is another one that is not, or maybe this has changed recently. That's one of the flags. There are others that you might also want to enable in your projects. And it's these ones here. The first one is the one that the first one is to make all the Swift tasks cacheable. The second one is to make all Objective-C or C kind of tasks also cacheable. So that there's that flag that you can also set. Then there is another feature that is somewhat related, is make sure that modules are explicit, and this allows the build system to do some optimizations that otherwise wouldn't be possible. This is more related to, also productivity, make things compile faster, but also make things reliable. And then there is this other flag that they mentioned, is also, it opts into a new compiler driver, which is supposed to be more efficient. We did some benchmarking and the difference is not that significant, but that might change in the future. I'll try with the flag that I mentioned, and then I will add this one too. Swift enable compile cache. Swift. And then I'm going to go to derived data so that you see what happens there. I never remember the path of this directory. But yeah, derived data, we see a bunch of projects there. So this will be the pre-compilation cache setup. And there is this new compilation cache directory. I'm going to clean and I'm going to build. And let's go to this tab here. So difficult, like Zoom adds a bunch of stuff in my screen. No. We can go to the logs of the build and we can search for cache. And it says that there are 61 cacheable tasks. Not all the tasks are cacheable, and this is something that Apple will improve over time. And there are 0 hits. 0 hits means there's nothing in the cache. So if I go to derived data, and then I delete everything except compilation cache, and then I try to build again, and then I go to the new build, search for cache. Now it's telling me that from 61 cacheable tasks, it had 61 hits. So basically everything came from the cache. Locally, this means reliability. So it's much better than derived data. So one of the first things that you can do tomorrow is to enable this. The second thing is, because cache is hash-based, you can have multiple copies of the repository, which is, I don't know if it's something that you do with agents, they will all be accessing the same cache. So it's a big improvement in the agentic coding world. The other piece that is also important is when you think of how the build system builds the app, I guess all of your apps are modular in some way because you need to share code, because you want to represent the domains of the company. The way you architect the app is very important for efficiency. I was chatting with someone the other day who came from working at big companies, and one of the first things that he did in his first project was to architect things in this way, and it makes a huge difference. The idea is make things as horizontal as possible, have some kind of layer of core features that they can depend on each other. Those horizontal features don't make them depend on each other, and then at the top you kind of connect all together. It comes with a bit of overhead, because if you need to glue everything together, it means a bit of dependency injection, connecting things at runtime, but the overhead is really worth it. What this means is you have to think about the fact that every time you change one of the modules, you are invalidating everything that depends on that module. So if you organize things in a very vertical way and people are always working at the bottom, they're always causing everything that depends on that to recompile. Incremental builds are not efficient. So this is really about making incremental builds efficient by being smart about how you organize the architecture of your app. I think Spotify has a blog post I called this some time ago micro features, then we call it modular architecture. Spotify has very good blog posts on this. And they also, the features, they separate between implementation and interface. So you depend on interfaces and then you inject the implementation. The other piece where I still see a lot of, these are things that we see every day at Tuist, like people show up, I have this issue, or like we talk to companies and then we see their setup, and these are like constants in our interactions with developers and companies. There is this classic of it works for me kind of thing, no? Like you use Homebrew to install something, and then at some point you end up with different versions of the same tools in different places, and then after 1 hour of debugging, you realize that actually you're using different versions of the same tool. There are things that are difficult to control, like the Xcode version, because macOS by default does auto updates. But there are things that you can do, for example, for the dependencies of your project. If you use something like SwiftLint, Swift Format, Tuist, you want to make sure that everyone is on the same version. Homebrew is not an answer, unfortunately. I know everyone loves Homebrew, but like it's really not good at like fixing versions. What we recommend at Tuist all the time, we are a bit of an evangelist of this tool, is MIS. And I like the way they describe themselves. They call themselves a front end for dev environments. And what the tool does is two things. Well, it does a bunch of other things, but the main two features are I install a version of the tool and I activate it. And this is the most beautiful part. You see it into a directory, it tells you some tools are missing, you do miss install, and then that's it. Like you will be using the same version that everyone is using in your company. I'll demo that piece. Maybe you've used something like Mint in Swift. It's similar, but it works with any tool. It's not really coupled to the Swift ecosystem. I'm gonna show you the Tuist repository. All the source is available. It was initially just a CLI, but now we have docs, server. So you have this mis.taml file, and this tools option, you say, I want to use this version of Tuist, of SwiftLint, of Swift Format, Git Cliff. Yeah, there are some other things that are not Swift specific. And then once you do mis install, it's going to install all the tools. And then if I do, for example, Tuist version, I don't know if it's minus version or it's just version without the. It's telling me it's using that version. I can change that. I can go to, I don't know if I have this one installed, probably it will tell me no, it's missing automatically. I do misinstall. The developers in the team will see that, and it will tell them to run misinstall because they are not using the same version as everyone else. We have a post hook thingy that runs after the installation, but now I think Tuist should be real version. I should be using that other version. And it has super cool commands where, let's say you want to test a different version of a particular tool. You can do mis exec Tuist version 4.104, the one that I was using before, -- and everything that comes after that is going to be executed with that version. So if I do Tuist version, it's going to use that version. So if you want to play with different versions of different tools, you don't have to install it. You can just say exec this tool and run this command. And I think it's beautiful. So you fix the version. You can also say latest, and they create a log file. And that makes sure that every single environment, not just the local ones, but CI, they're all using the same version. So with that, no more issues of like different versions, different places, and different outputs. You shouldn't be wasting time on that. So that's about the development. Let's talk about integration. As I said before, like usually leaders, when something is slow, they think about first I hire people. The second thing that they think about is I make CI faster. Let's see how I explain this. When CI companies offer Mac Minis, they are very limited in regards to what they can do with the Mac Mini. So Apple legally imposes two things. One is maximum 2 VMs per Mac. And that explains why many companies just have Mac Minis and not Mac Pros. Because if you have 2 Mac Pros and you can run maximum 2 VMs, then it's a waste of hardware. The second thing is that you need to keep them for maximum 24 hours. So if you get a Mac, you need to get it for 24 hours. And this is very challenging for the companies that do CI, because if we compare that to Linux, where you can ask for a machine, return the machine, pay for the time that you used it, it's easy to kind of satisfy the elastic demand of CI. In CI, you can go from I don't have any bill to I have 100 to I have none. And as a company that has to build a service on top of that is very tricky, because there will be moments where you have to provide 100 machines to the company, and other times where you will be like, I'm paying for this Mac Mini and no one is using it. So what that means is that many CI companies say, tell me how many you're gonna need in terms of concurrency, and you're like, I don't know. You don't really know if you're gonna need 100, 200, and especially with agents where a lot of code is being generated. I think the peaks that those companies must be seeing must be crazy. That's why in many companies you find this, they limit your plan in some way. They tell you max concurrency 10, that's it. And then you push your work, and then your job is waiting in some queue to be picked up by some job, and eventually it runs, and then you wasted a lot of time. I think this model is broken, but there are solutions for that. There are now companies that offer runners that operate at a scale in which unlimited jobs or machines is possible. One of those companies is named Space. I say they operate at a scale because they provide the machines to build Kite. I included GitHub Actions, but I heard very bad things about their machines. Mac Stadium, and I've seen also companies doing AWS, EC2, Mac. I think AWS sooner or later will provide, I give you runners as a service kind of thing. So I would recommend to look at your CI setup and see if there is some kind of concurrency limit. It's possible there is none, but usually there's a bit of limit. So observe how your jobs are like going up and down, how many of them are being queued, the time that they spend in the queue, and if you see that they're spending a lot of time in the queue, I think you should talk to your CI company. The second piece, and I think again it's important to understand these limitations. Apple allows you to have these machines, and you can do maximum 2 VMs per machine, and then you use some VM technology. You run things inside the machine, but there is no way for them to control if there are 2 builds running in 2 VMs, how many resources each of them has access to. So if in one VM you're running a build that is very CPU intensive, the second build won't have access to the resources that this VM is using. So you don't have dedicated machines for you. This is very common. And then you see, like, you try to look at the numbers, they are not very stable because it doesn't depend on the machine itself. It depends on what is being run in the same machine as you. Again, this really depends on the providers. And I think some providers are very specific about, hey, these are dedicated machines. They're usually more expensive because they are allocating them for you. Namespace is one of them, Mac Stadium, AWS. Again, another question that you can bring up to your provider is like, yeah, are they dedicated? If not, if they allocate it for you, then you will see your build times should be faster, because basically it's just all the resources in the machine are just there for you. Then there is the whole part of like Apple Silicon, like Apple keeps making processors faster, but not all the CI companies are able to keep up with that, especially because you buy M3, you buy 1,000 machines, you put them in a data center. Next year there is M4. So you need to start thinking about how to distribute all the different accounts, all the different clients across like different types of machines. Apple is surprisingly very bad at keeping up with Apple Silicon. I heard recently from a company that provides runners that AWS is not that interested in providing Mac Minis. And the only reason why they do it is because they have one big customer. And I think the big customer is Apple. So I think Apple is using AWS machines. They don't want to do it themselves because I think they probably realize how painful it is to use those machines for CI. I was chatting with the same developer. He said, sometimes in the data center, the machine goes down and we have to wake up the machine. And because of the security features that Mac Mini has, you need to type the keyboard and you cannot use a Bluetooth or remote keyboard. So we have a mechanical keyboard that can be remotely controlled from outside. So when the Mac is rebooted, they have to detect that and type remotely in a mechanical keyboard connected to the Mac Mini. So why would Apple want to spend time doing this? There are some companies that are better than others getting the hardware. I always recommend to be on the latest, but I think before you get on the latest, is always, there are so many things that you can optimize before you spend. It's a lot of money. Always keep in mind that it's very difficult for a CI company to satisfy your elastic demand. So you will naturally see that reflected in the price. The other thing on CI, like typically what people do in their pipelines is what we usually see is three things. You install the toolchain. Sometimes the toolchain comes with the image itself. So Xcode, the simulators, all of that are things that you don't need to install. But you install things like SwiftLint, Swift Format, or some kind of additional tool that you use in your workflow, and then you do the task: building, testing, linting. So with every single step, there are always opportunities for things that you can optimize. For example, Mies has they have a GitHub action, so they are able to cache the installation of the tools. The thing with caching is always tricky because sometimes caching is not as fast as you would expect that to be. So you always need to keep that in mind. Sometimes you are so excited about the whole idea that you enable caching in some step and you think it's going to be much faster, but it's not. And I think a good example of that, and we'll talk about that later, is the whole Swift Package Manager resolution of packages. I don't know if you're happy or sad about the time that it takes to resolve packages, but it's super annoying. Like on CI, we've seen times up to 3 minutes, and then people think, well, that's I can cache the directory, but then because you cache the directory, you store that in S3, then you pull that from S3, but then you look at the size of the directory and it's like, it's huge. So it's faster to resolve the packages than pulling or pushing them to a cache. So that's why I think it's very important to measure, to benchmark, and then you make your own decisions. As I said, like at the end of the day, there are two approaches for caching on CI. One is remote cache. So usually some kind of S3 solution. GitHub Actions does that. So when you say cache, they take your directory, they zip it, and then they push it to S3. And there is the whole network overhead of pushing or pulling that directory. There are some companies, especially the ones that provide runners, that they mount a volume on a disk on the machine. So that is just faster, much faster going through the networks. But that really depends on whether your provider has that possibility. Namespace, for example, they do. And then they mount the volume. When you restore directories, it's not even copying directories. You just access the directory from that remote volume. As I said, not all the companies provide that. You can check and you can ask. GitHub Actions, for example, though, doesn't have this feature. So when you cache the whole Swift packages directory, it's super slow. You go through S3. I don't know if you stopped to think about why Swift Package Manager is so slow to resolve and why caching doesn't help. Like when Apple designed Swift Package Manager, they thought they would make it decentralized, and decentralized means you have to clone the repositories so that you can resolve the versions, and then you can resolve the graph, and then you understand what are the different versions that you want to use. Some repositories must be huge, so you have the whole history of a repo, even though you are only using one version of that dependency. So you end up with this giant directory that you want to cache, but it's huge. So there's nothing you can do about that. So yeah, as I said, like if you push and pull the directory, it's gonna be very slow. If you have a mounted volume, it's a different story. We try to delete the Git directory because it's the history, you don't need it. But then the next time you run it, it tries to pull it again, so it's kind of pointless. And something that this is something that we saw and we wanted to solve at Tuist. A lot of the things that we're solving these days don't require generated projects. This is a good example of one where we build a registry, and what this registry does is it mirrors the Swift package index. So for every version, we get a copy, we store it, and then instead of resolving through Git, it resolves through our server. And when you do something like that, you don't clone the whole history of the repo, you just clone that version of the dependency that you're using. On top of that, we serve it from a global S3 network. So they are like super low latency, and the speed up is very significant. And the directory that you end up with locally is very lightweight. So you can also use local caching on top of things are faster. I'm gonna set this up so that you can see it yourself. Hopefully Cloudflare will be fine. Not this directory. I'll go to the NS Barcelona. And then I'm going to set up Tuist. It's a simple command. You do Tuist init. It's asking you if you're using generated projects or you're just integrating the whole thing with NS Barcelona. I say I'm integrating that with NS Barcelona. It's asking me if I want to use server features. Registry is one of them. I say yes. And it's asking me if I want that project to be created under my personal account or under Tuist. I said on my personal account, and then the project is connected. I'm going to add one dependency so that we see how it's being resolved and how much disk space it takes. So I'm going to go here, go to packages. Yesterday I was playing with Kingfisher, so that's the one that I'm going to add. Yes. And then to see the space that it takes, something that we can do is we can do a Xcode build where we pass the clone source path, packages dir path. This is when you run Xcode build, you say resolve everything in this directory instead of the default one inside the app data. This is NS Barcelona, and this is also NS Barcelona, and some build settings to disable signing. It's doing the dependency resolution because we enable cache. You see there are a bunch of cache related output, the ones that you would see in the UI of Xcode. It does the compilation and it finished. If we look at that directory, which should have been created, is 72 megabytes. One version of one dependency. It's insane. So now that we are gonna do it with the Tuist registry, so I'm gonna delete this dependency, and then we just need to run these two commands: Tuist registry setup, and then it has to create some config in my system that says there's this registry, it's available, and then the second piece of that is we need to authenticate. We need to tell the configuration how put that token in the system so that the Swift package registry is able to authenticate. This is not ideal. I don't like the simplicity of the authentication part of the protocol, but it is what it is. Now I'm connected to the registry. So I come here to Xcode. I add a package. I might need to close. 1 second. Yeah, I don't think it recognized the registry change inside the Xcode project. But now if I come here, I add a package. Now it's asking me for my password to access the credentials that Tuist put in the system. I don't know how many times it will ask me. Still not showing the registry. 1 second. I tested this yesterday. It was working, so maybe there's something. Let me try one more time. Yeah, it should be on Tuist registry login. Maybe it's still like it does a call to the server to check that everything, to list all the packages. So I don't know if there would be some issues still. Today we got like many 500 with the Cloudflare. I'll try one more time. It's clearly trying to do something. Oh yeah, here you go. It's Kingfisher. It says it comes from the Tuist registry, and then I can specify a version. For example, this one I was playing with yesterday. You add the package, and instead of having to clone the whole Git history to resolve the version, it just pulls that one. Done. And now I'm gonna do the same Xcode build command. If I can say it, Xcode build, and then we can compare the size of the directories. I'll delete the previous one before. So it went from 76 megabytes to just 4 megabytes. For this, you need an account, but we're going to change that in the following 2 weeks when we have time to implement it. But like, we're going to make it publicly available. So you don't need to be authenticated. Any person without a Tuist account will be able to access the registry, and the packages will be served with very low latency, with some rate limit. But yeah, you want to have access to it, and the change is very easy. These two commands, you won't need them anymore. You just add the registry as we tell you, and then it will work. Then the next thing we need to talk about is caching. This is another piece that a lot of people think about when it comes to optimizing their build system. And the whole idea with caching is always the same thing. I think you saw a bit of this with the Xcode compilation cache. You get some hash for some task. Instead of going to the compiler or going to some tool to do something, you check if it exists somewhere. If it does, you get it. The thing is that it's very important that your build graph is hermetic. And by that, I mean no side effects. The same input produces the same output, which is not always the case in Xcode build system. And the build needs to be super deterministic. Bazel, again, has a nice page on this. And I believe the reason why Apple is taking some time to make all the build tasks cacheable is that some of them are not deterministic, or some of them have side effects. So they need to do a lot of changes internally. And I think by making those changes, they will end up breaking Xcode projects. So I think they're in this kind of weird position where they're slowly enabling tasks one by one, the ones that they are confident that they won't break anything. Eventually, they will migrate everything, but I would expect some pain on your side. There are different solutions. You might have heard of Bazel. Bazel is that idea, but in a very generic way that works across many different build tools, and it's very extensible. At Tuist, we built one for generated projects. We call it module cache. And there is the Xcode cache, which you use so locally, which can also work remotely. As I said, like a lot of companies use Bazel, not a lot. On the iOS ecosystem, there are some companies using Bazel. And we've seen companies using Bazel and stop using Bazel because the cost of like introducing that, maintaining that, keeping up with Apple updates is a nightmare. It's very costly. And the nice thing of that is that I think it's one of the most powerful build systems. You get a lot of improvements. Every task is cacheable. The tool is very mature. Like Google is behind making this happen. Although, even though Google maintains the build system, the plugins or the rules for iOS are maintained by the companies that need them. I think it's a Spotify, Tinder, and a bunch of others. The learning curve is huge. It replaces Xcode build completely, which means when you integrate that into Xcode, the integration is a bit like they use script build phases. There are some things that don't work. For example, the progress bar where it tells you 100% of the build or something that doesn't work. So it's a bit of a meh. We built Tuist caching for generated projects. So if you're using generated projects, you can use this. The nice thing, the idea behind it is that we take your graph, we create XE frameworks, executables, bundles for every target of the graph. When you generate the project, we hash every module, every target. And if we can replace that with a binary, we do it. Unlike Bazel, the granularity is on the target level. But it's fine for many companies if you follow the architecture that I mentioned before. So you generate, and then suddenly a lot of elements in your projects are just binaries. And I want to show you this because I think it's cool. So I'm gonna use the Tuist project itself because we dog food we use Tuist with Tuist. So I'm gonna go to Tuist, the source directory, and then I'm gonna do Tuist generate. And this gives me an Xcode project where by default, we replace as binaries all the external dependencies because we assume that locally people don't plan to work on external dependencies. So those for sure will be binaries, but you can be more specific about I would like to get binaries only for this, or I would like to get sources just for this. I think it's trying to go through the network. I don't know how fast this will be, but let's try. If not, I can disable that remote part and like go just with the local. Let's try that a little faster. This is a bit like saying don't go to the server to interact with that project. And if I generate, it should try to use binaries from my system. Well, I don't have them cached, so let's try remotely. I will continue the talk and I can come back here later. I think the network is not as fast as I thought it would be. But I'm gonna leave that there. And the last cache is the one that I showed before with Apple introduced. The improvements are not as great as the others because not all the tasks are cacheable. And for example, for packages, they don't enable this. So actually, now it worked. Yeah, so this is my project. You see all the modules and targets of Tuist. Some of them are like unit tests, target, and then there are some dependencies that are not in the cache yet. So we get them as sources. Well, the way we integrate the dependencies is different. We convert them into a Xcode project, and that allows to basically have a project that is ready to compile as soon as you open it. But then there is this cache folder where you look at all your dependencies and they're all binaries. So when you clean, which is something that developers still do a lot, you're going to be linking against the binaries. And this is amazing. If you, for example, know you are going to work on some particular piece of the graph, like Tuist generate, Tuist core, for example, that means I plan to focus on this. You can pass Tuist core, you can pass multiple targets, you can group targets together, and you can say I want to focus on all the design related targets. The project is much smaller. Smaller, it means it's faster indexing, Xcode is faster, compilation is faster, everything is wonderful. And then it's just all binaries. So I'm gonna be compiling just these two targets. So if I clean, like the compilation will be much faster. As I said, in theory, if incremental compilations are reliable, you shouldn't be doing clean builds locally. That's unfortunately not the case. Hopefully in the future, incremental builds will be reliable. SwiftUI Previews will be reliable. Caching will be low latency and amazing. And then we won't have to be thinking about this, but like as a solution for today, is super cool. And as I was saying, there is Xcode cache, always the same input, hash, go, does the file exist? If it does, then I get it. The improvements are not as great because not all the tasks are cacheable. Swift packages are not cacheable. It's very early, but they will get there. So my theory is that all the companies that move to Bazel will come back from Bazel. I think. I don't know if it will be. My theory, seeing how many engineers are working on this, is that maybe 2 years and some breakages in projects, but they definitely want to get there, not just because of the speed, because of the reliability of the features that require on a build system whose incremental builds are reliable too. That's the, so people complain about SwiftUI Previews not working until Apple moves to this model. I don't think it will be fixed. And I also wanted to show you this with Tuist because we support that as well, remote caching. We have the module version of this and we have the Xcode caching. So everything that you saw locally, we can do it remotely. So I'm going to enable it so that you see it. I think this is fine. I'm going to use the Swift Barcelona project. If you go to the docs of Tuist, we have this cache option. You have the Xcode cache option. It tells you how to set it up. And it tells you, well, you do the Tuist init, which I did before, and then you do the Tuist setup cache. So I come here. I run that command. It's telling me enable caching, which we did. And there are a couple of features that we need to add. One is this path to my socket in the file system. What this one does is we set up a daemon in your system because the build system can talk to a local server instead of persisting things locally. So we spin up a server, you don't see it, but it's processing those requests and going to our server to serve those binaries. I'm going to apply those build settings and you will see how everything works. I need to open the project first. Yeah, here, same story. I come here. If it opens, yeah. Build settings. I'll scroll to the bottom. Yeah, when it's user defined, it's a bit annoying to set. So that's the value, and then it's this one here. This you need to only do it once. Then this one is true, which enables the concept of remote caching. They call it plugin because I think they are going to make this somewhat extensible, I think. I don't even know if the final version of this will be a build setting. I'm very surprised they made this a build setting. But yeah, this is going to change a lot. They don't talk about this publicly, but the feature is there and you will see more companies talking about it. And then I'm going to, throw. Yeah. So if I clean now, and to see this in action, we also need to know if it's interacting with the server. If there's no visual indication of is this interacting with the server? I guess you need to trust me, but I want you to see it. So for that, I'm going to use this other Tuist feature called Insights, which allows you to have telemetry over what's happening in your builds. The way you set this up is you go to your scheme, you edit the scheme, you go to the build scheme, post action, you add it here, run a script, you paste the command, you say inherit the build settings from the main target, and it's just calling Tuist inspect build. We close this, we clean, and then we build. It will do the same as before, with the difference that this time the binaries will be pushed to a server, and we can see it. So I'm gonna go to tuist.dev, and the URL should be my account handle, Pedro, and then the name of the project, Swift Barcelona, which is the same as, we follow the same convention as GitHub, account/project handle. So here you see there's one build that I just ran. You can go to the builds. You can see there was one build, it passed, it was clean, it was run by me, and it was 27 minutes ago. And if I come here, I can see Xcode cache, there were 56 hits, 5 misses. The hit rate was quite high. This was the number of downloads, uploads. This is weird because I did not upload anything. Could be a bug. Yeah. But this is the interesting part. Like you see the tasks that the Swift compiler was, or the build system was running locally. For example, a meeting module for Swift Barcelona with this hash that it calculated, and it says missed. It's not in the cache. Yeah. I think the information is wrong because it's basically considering download a local hit. But obviously a local hit, you are not downloading anything. It found it in your system. So here you can see that this task with this hash, it found it locally, so it used it. Now I'm gonna clean everything locally, so it should basically do all the hits remotely. It will go to the server. So as I did before, I can come here, I'll delete the compilation cache directory, and then I come back, and then I build again. And if I go to the build runs, yeah, it completed. It says, well, I think the part of detecting incremental or clean is a bit tricky, so it's possible that the thing is not accurate. But if we come here, actually, maybe I did not clean. 1 second. Yeah, we detect clean by deleting derived data, and I just deleted the local cache, not the derived data. Now it's a proper clean build. So now we'll finish. Now we can come here. Yeah, this is the last build, 12 seconds. I can come here, and then I can go, if I go to Xcode cache, then you see the hit rate, the number of hits, the number of misses. There are things that are not really, what we found by doing this is that sometimes the whole hit is a bit non-deterministic. So multiple times you get different hashes. So I think there's still some improvement to do by Apple. But here's the idea. I think at the end of the day, like we'll get there in terms of like caching capabilities, and we'll be able to hopefully do caching without using generated projects or anything like that. It's getting there, and we are trying to build kind of the infrastructure for that, and also the analytics. You need to understand like how much is being pushed, pulled, and all of that. Yeah, I think now I understand what happens. Before, because there were local elements, it did not push anything to the server. So this time the build has been mostly about pushing. That's why there is so much upload. If now I clean everything here, and then I build, it should mostly be pulls from the server. So let's check if that's correct. Yeah, but yeah, there are so many. You know, it's going directly to local. I think to test it, you will need to delete local. Oh, actually, let me try. Delete local, build it. Well, clean everything here. And all, no, Kingfisher is gone, but I don't. I'm gonna delete Kingfisher 1 second. Hopefully now we will do the whole pool from the remote cache. Yeah, so we can come here, same thing, build. Yeah, that's what I was expecting. So It's mostly downloads. They are coming from the server. The hit rate is 88%. Some misses, some hits. You can see exactly which ones those were. Some are missing, as I said, like the way things are calculated, the hash is still not fully deterministic. But like, here's the idea. And you don't need generated projects for that. So if you wanna play with the feature, you can do it. The thing about this type of cache is that in the module cache, latency doesn't matter that much as long as the bandwidth is good, like you download things fast. But here, latency matters a lot. Like if I have to go, let's say you have the CI machines in the US, and then you go to Frankfurt to ask, do you have this? And it comes back with no. Do you have this? No. Do you have this? It's like 100 milliseconds. Like at the end of the day, it's faster to go to your compiler in the file system. So the challenge here is how do you bring the cache server as close to developers and machines as possible? And this is what we're actually obsessed now with solving, not just for the Apple ecosystem, but for any ecosystems. We call the technology fabric, but the whole idea is, can we take the cache, layer that, and deploy it for customers such that you can put one cache layer at the office here in the Glovo office, a second layer in Spain, a third layer or another layer in Germany to share things with Delivery Hero, and then you build this network of cache layers such that the latency is as minimum as possible. This is what we're trying to solve. CI providers are starting to solve that for their CI environments. But what about developers? What about agentic environments? Like those also need caching. And I'm also playing with peer-to-peer. It's super cool. Like the idea is if multiple developers are in the office and I start compiling, some developers will get a notification like airdrop. Oh, this person is trying to use your cache. Do you want to give the person access to it? And then if you say yes, then it will go in the local network to get those binaries. I think this is super cool. I mean, we want to put it out there. We're building a bit of infra and technology to enable this vision. I think I'm talking for too long, but yeah, I'm almost done with the talk. Then the whole thing about selective testing, same idea. Same with cache. You cannot build everything all the time because it's very slow. Same with testing. If you test everything all the time, it's not really efficient. So you selectively test things. There are multiple ways you can do that. At Tuist, if you use generative projects, we have what we call selective testing. Mike, who I believe works at Delivery Hero, built his own solution. You can build yours. The way it works is you analyze the graph, you see your code changes. Based on that, you determine which tests you run, and then you run those instead of everything. When you combine binary caching and selective testing, the combination can bring you significant improvements. And the idea is I skip compilation commands or I skip tests, but it's all about skipping. The terminology that people are using are smart test selection and binary caching, but it's all about skipping build, skipping test. And last but not least, parallelization. You can parallelize within the same machine. So if you have tests, you can go to the scheme and you can say run them in parallel. Sometimes, oftentimes, parallelization means flakiness because you might be mutating like some kind of global state, and then when you run so many things in parallel, there are race conditions and then flakiness. That's why it's very important if you start enabling parallelization that you keep your test suite healthy in terms of like the things that you do from your test. And in some cases, there are some limits. If you do snapshot testing, you cannot create as many simulators as you would like per machine. So you need to do, we've seen companies doing sharding. So you do separate build for testing and test without building. So you first build the app and the test, and then you run the test. And the second part of running the test, you run them in shards. You take all your test suite and say, these first two suites in one machine, this other one in another machine, and that one in another machine. Sometimes within host parallelization is enough, but in some cases where you're limited by the number of simulators, then you need to do these kinds of things. And it comes with a bit of overhead because pipelines are static, so you cannot really dynamically say, at least we want to solve this in a dynamic manner where we can do the sharding based on some information that we have on the server. And last but not least, flakiness. It happens. There are some tricks that you can follow to avoid it. Like the one that I like to tell everyone is like, make sure that any state in your test is really scoped to the test. And Swift has now this thing called Task Local, which is, I think, is an amazing tool for doing this kind of thing where you can dependency inject something. It's propagated all the way down through structure concurrency, and you can access any variable that you inject from the test, mock everything, establish your services, and yeah, this is very important. Like, don't use global state in your test suites. Just to wrap it up, we saw that yeah, project generators eliminate Xcode project conflicts. It's not the only way. You can use Swift Package Manager. You can use buildable folders. Those are tools that you can use. Split monolith files, whether the monolith files is a PBX proj into multiple PBX proj or like source files. Make sure that you're hygienic with your graph. Define clear boundaries, structure things horizontally if possible. Enable compilation cast. That takes you one flag in your build settings. You can do it tomorrow. Hopefully things will get more reliable, or they should get more reliable over time. Version locking, give me a shot. I think you will like it. All the companies that we told them to use it, they end up using it for everything. And then for CI, check with your CI providers if there is any constraint with like concurrency. Do caching. You can try Bazel Twist. You can try to over remote cache for Xcode. Some CI providers are also starting to provide caching. Play that. Don't expect a lot of improvements, but maybe you see some, and some is good enough. Optimize the Swift Package Manager. Forget about the remove Git because I proved that it's not possible. So you can use our registry. It will be publicly available for anyone without any account. Selective testing, try to do it. You don't need to use Twitch generated projects. There are some open source tools for that they are easy to set up, and they are based on some Git data. And then to prevent flakiness, like make sure that your tests are very isolated. So these are the common things that we see. The one that I think has the biggest impact is architecture, and that is very, very, very important. And then there are so many other minor things. And just one more thing, which I've been mentioning for some time, is like, I guess all of you are using coding agents these days. The slides were made by Cloud Code with a lot of tweaking and adjusting, and like to make sure that it contains what I want to say. But yeah, I think it's an amazing tool. So naturally, you want to use it with Xcode projects. There are things that I recommend everyone to do. I should maybe put that in a blog post eventually. But like the challenges with agentic coding and Xcode is multiple project copies. You solve that with Xcode cache, so enable that. There are context window limits. So if you pipe Xcode build output into the agent, you will exhaust the context window. So for that, you can use this tool called XT-Sift, which is like XC-Beautify, but for agents. So you pipe the Xcode build output through Xcode-Sift and to the agent, and then it will be much less noise. Most of the output from Xcode build is not relevant to the agent. Then the agent will have to add and remove files. Apart from coding, it has to also create files, no buildable folders. So use them tomorrow. One right click to the folder, and then you get buildable folders. And then with that, like the file additions and removals can be easily done by the agent because they don't need to modify the project. If you had to modify the project, there is this MCP server called Xcode Proj MCP server that basically exposes an interface for the agent to do this kind of add a target, remove that target, add a link in build phase. So these are things that it really doesn't take you much to do in your projects, and maybe tomorrow, like everyone will be using agents in a much more streamlined way. But yeah, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you. I don't know if there is time for questions.
Yeah, we are going to do the questions at the end during the networking, since we have 2 more talks.
Able to let me in? Okay. Hi, everyone. It's not every day that you make a talk about a toolkit and you do your talk right after the creator of said toolkit that gives a presentation, but here goes nothing. Can I get a quick show of hands of anybody that's using Tuist today in their projects, either professionally or in your projects? Okay, super. I was expecting a lot more hands, so that's great to hear. Despite the color of the talk slides, the title, and the Tuist sticker that I have on my laptop, I am not paid in any way to advocate for Tuist. I just want to share a really great story about how transformative it was for me. So hi, I'm Kelvin, and I'm a lead mobile engineer at Levin and Rigner. I've been there for the last 6 months. We're an agency based out of Brooklyn, and we're working on lots of cool stuff, including for me, what's very new in the last 6 months is working in spatial. So what I actually want to do is go back 2 years ago and tell you about a little story. Whenever I worked for a consultancy based out of Belfast called Instill. And one day I was asked if I could be, as a tech lead, I was asked if I could lead a project for a client based out of Texas who provide paramedic software. So paramedics rock up and they need to capture patient data, capture information about a scene. And they had an app called EHR that looks like this. It's a Windows-based app. It has 9 tabs. Does anybody know what happens if you put 9 tabs on an iPad? You get 8, and you get the 3 dots that when you tap, you get the 9th. So we had a very interesting UX challenge because we were asked to build it Greenfield. And I was asked to build a Greenfield and to lead what was started as a small and then led up to a team of about 8 or 9 engineers. And very quickly, whenever you're in this position, you think about all the mistakes that maybe you've seen. And certainly in the projects that I've picked up over my career, where as a consultancy, you come in, you improve things for companies, and you see a lot of interesting design decisions and implementations of such and technology choices, and you think that you're going to do it better. That's the naive attitude that I had about the actual implementation itself. And we ended up with something like this. This is the iPad equivalent. My favorite compliment I got about this was an old manager that said, Kelvin, you've built a settings app because it just looks so basic and it doesn't really have much identity. And I love this compliment because it wasn't meant as one. What I take from that is from the legends that I work with across engineering, design, product, and quality assurance, is that we're able to distill such a complex domain and break it down to something that anybody could use. But it gets better because we actually had Apple and Battersea giving us some guidance. And with a few little changes here and there, not very much, honestly, we were able to get a beautiful iPhone app as well, which was not part of what we were originally asked to do. And even better, because paramedics deserve the best, we're able to bring a lovely dark mode experience in there as well. And that was great. But what I want to share is the frustrations and the stress and the difficulties that we had as a team, that certainly I had as a tech lead. My first time I get to think all the tech decisions, I never once thought about this thing, the Xcode project format, and all the challenges that it would lead for whenever your team starts out very small and then it very quickly starts to grow. And thankfully, Pedro, you went into the really tough things that I don't really understand, if I'm being truly honest. I just know that whenever you look in your Xcode project, you see something like this, and you go in a little bit further and you see this very confusing mess of indices of all the file types that you add. And if I'm adding stuff and you're adding stuff, then it's going to be a really bad time. We all know this if we've ever worked with multiple folks on an Xcode project. So it's a source of pain, a really bad source of pain. And I think back to, it was coming up to Christmas this one year, and the team had scaled up and we were really enthusiastic about the work they're doing, because it's not often that you actually get to work on a Greenfield project. It's not often that you get that trust and that opportunity and to build something that's going to be so impactful, because getting this right really transforms the opportunities and the work that paramedics do, and that leads to better patient outcomes. But we were losing all of our enthusiasm because we just had a hell of merge conflicts. And the reason for that, as Pedro rightly called out, is that it's not designed for modularity. It's very implicit, it's very hard to understand, and it's frequent and full of conflicts. So Our Bitbucket looked like this. Everybody wanted their turn to merge. Whenever somebody's build went green, it's like, get in there, get your merge in, and then it's the next person's problem. And that's a truly awful developer experience, because coming into the project and thinking about all the decisions, all the technical frameworks that we would use, the databases and such, I never once considered this to be a possibility, because my experience was always in very small teams where with some Git unify attributes, we're able to kind of get around it. But the other part of the problem was that we were using Xcode Cloud, because it was this wonderful thing where we didn't have to go into sort of a Jenkins setup that I have a bit of stress about or trauma about from years ago. We could just get, the idea was that all of that CI stuff, all that build, test, deploy, that gets out of the way and we can focus on building a really great experience. But it's really slow, because all those Intel blades, all those servers that you can no longer actually buy, Apple have decided to keep them. And yes, Xcode Cloud is very cheap, but it's also very painful. So, and the fact was that we had this big announcement that the client wanted to do. They wanted to show all of their customers in the United States and Canada that we're listening to your feedback and we're going to have this iOS experience. But we were hesitant because we had this problem. And then we found Tuist. We were looking at how do other people solve this problem, the severe Git merge conflicts, the implicit project configurations. And we found Tuist after evaluating a few variants that use JSON and YAML to define a project structure. And the great thing about Tuist is because it is itself a way to define your project through a Swift DSL. You generate using a CLI, and that's really it. That's all we had to do. It looks like something like this. You open up your project. We have our target, and we have a target with all the destinations, the bundle ID, where all the sources live, and then the same for accompanying test target. So as soon as you open a project, and because you're working in Swift and Xcode, you can very quickly start to grasp the context of what you're working in. Because, as the folks at Tuist have said, it should own the complexity and expose a simple, safe, and what's key for me, enjoyable interface. Because the enthusiasm that we had, we were able to start and claw that back, because it's explicit, because there's nothing explicit or very little explicit about the current vanilla Xcode experience. So the CLI command, Tuist generate, it's looking at because it knows how you define your project, it knows all of your configuration, all of your dependencies, it can be deterministic in its output. For me and for everybody in the team, we're going to get the same experience. So we run Tuist generate. One thing, a lot of us didn't use the CLI much. We didn't use terminal much. We liked our GUI applications for Git and such. So there's a little bit of using the CLI, but actually that wasn't a problem at all. And we get this rich deterministic output every single time. And the other thing, Pedro, whenever you're going through and adding those build flags, for me, over the years of working at Xcode, anytime I see this and have to go into this, I start to panic because I have no idea what I'm going to do. But what I am sure about is I'm going to break something. And because I'm maybe a bit messy with Git and the Xcode file format, I'm going to leave it in a pretty tragic state. So better get ready to just nuke the whole thing and reclone it. But that's where Tuist Edit comes in as a great thing, because it understands that files that you set up with the Tuist schema, and you're able to go through and see an overview. And you can see all these features that I get into, but the root project itself, ours at the time, maybe, yeah, a year and a half ago, looked like something like this. So let me break it down so you can actually see it a little bit closer. So the project itself, automatic scheme options about code coverage, the testing options, and specific configurations could all be spelled out and be deterministic. The configuration is just around any XC configs, so there's a bit of portability if you've already established those. And then the target itself, an example here of a pre-run script that runs before the build, so we could lint our code and have that deterministic cleanliness that we were looking for and maximize our developer experience. To all of our dependencies, at the top, external dependencies that we've told Tuist about, like Realm, Mockable, Factory as such, to something like our projects, driver license kit, file system kit. If you look these up, you can't find them, because one of the transformative things about Tuist for me, a boss battle in mobile app development, both on Android and iOS the face of years, is I could never get extracting features out into their own dependencies. I could never crack that until this. And we're actually, because it's Swift code, we're able to build some nice extensions. So it's very easy for anybody in the team, regardless of their experience, to come in and say, I want to define another dependency, so a sync kit, something that encapsulates the complexity of synchronization to a server, and we can define external dependencies that we need. I actually don't think you need to do this, but I just put Swift data in here at the time. Turns out we didn't actually end up using it, but I thought it's great as a developer to come in and read, hang on, they're using Swift data here, so I can actually get an idea of what to expect as I come in. And these quotes are from the team at the time whenever the folks at Tuist were asking for some quotes about saving a lot of time. You're not fixing the project file every time you pull main. The whole no-git conflicts with the project file is a very nice addition. Being able to make small PRs and not have to fix configs is lovely. And the final one from me, Tuist Cloud improved my clean build times by 42%. So you could say the team was ecstatic because we could get that excitement back and we were actually able to deliver a fantastic experience, because I don't know how we would do it otherwise. And here's a little fun meme one of the guys in the team made. A fun fact, whenever I was the one that created the EHR project, and I use uppercasing, but sometimes certain developers, it would resolve to lowercase for them, and we never figured out why. And that was another thing that Tuist was able to fix for us as well. But it doesn't stop there. We actually went a little bit further and engaged with the folks at Tuist, at the time called Tuist Cloud, but now it's just under the umbrella of Tuist. This idea of caching, because Tuist, we've told Tuist about our project, our dependencies, on how we're getting them. So it understands that structure that's going to be able to cache that and take a hash of all our dependencies. And Pedro, maybe this is an old school throwback for you, because what you showed and what you folks have done today is just, you know, really, really nice. But this is the experience that we had, being able to understand our local, remote, and misses on the cache. And you could see whenever our cache hit rate was very consistently high as we adopted it through that year, which was great because it just it mitigated the fact that we didn't want to step off Xcode Cloud. We didn't want to take that time away from actually building the product itself. So we could mitigate, not fix, but mitigate that. But critically for developers, we saw the benefit both locally and on CI. An example of this, an old screenshot at the time, you can see for dependencies, it takes nearly a minute and a half to resolve those at that point before it goes on to resolving and compiling our actual app code itself. So taking a total of about 4 minutes and 13 seconds. And then just by caching and doing nothing else, we're able to bring that down to a total of 2 minutes and 25. And the actual dependencies themselves just takes about a couple of seconds to resolve. So that was, 30 to 40% improvement. And we didn't have to spend time tweaking the CI. We didn't have to do anything. We just engage with the folks at Tuist, and we just use a little command and automate that ourselves. Then came DC24 and the buildable folders, as Pedro also showed, the minimizing the project file changes and avoid version control conflicts with buildable folder references. That to me was good. It's good to see Apple considering the developer experience a little bit more, but it's not something that made me think, okay, let's just abandon all this Tuist stuff. Because this is something I found in the last week from a SDK sample from a particular company example I've been looking at. And I haven't made this a Tuist, I haven't migrated this to Tuist, but it's just my breakpoints, fair enough. But I don't know what the XC user state is, but I just know in anything that I work with in Tuist and any of the projects that define today, I never see something like this. And this is actually after I get reset hard. So I don't know why it's there. I just know this is why I need Tuist in my lifestyle. Because it illustrates, from contrasting that example of the paramedic app to the work I do now in an agency, where every week I could be working across multiple projects. I could be working across different prototypes and different client projects, which is quite a change. Having the Tuist project format itself is a form of documentation, much like your code. So I can go in and understand and help my team members understand what the expectations of a certain project are for its dependencies, its structure, or anything little specific that we need to do. And also the behavior is deterministic. We can just get right in there and actually just start building. And that's an example now of I'm doing a lot of work in spatial now, and I don't have to compromise with merge conflicts as we bring it across the team. And indeed, whenever we're building now, we're recently announced as partners along with Disney, Logitech, and Microsoft to build with the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, which is really exciting. Again, all these things, and we're not in big, massive teams. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to be choosing Tuist because of all the benefits that it gives me, as I've highlighted. And was it all perfect? Was it absolutely amazing experience throughout? That was not the case, because the migration itself, where I didn't understand the Xcode project format. I would say I still don't understand it. I just know that I want to get my code together. I want to adopt the latest frameworks, and I want to solve the problems for my clients and build great experiences. So doing the migration at the time was really, really hard because I didn't understand those things. And I also had you can't really say to clients, I need more time because I'm dealing with my Xcode project format. That's not something a client wants to hear. But thankfully, things are so much better now because there's a wealth of fantastic documentation from those folks that would solve the problem really quickly for us and help educate folks. Whether you're versed in iOS or just coming into it relatively new, it's a great place to learn how to solve those things. And the last thing, the takeaway that I want to share with you folks is community. I've joined a lot of Slacks over the years, especially prior to starting the project, trying to find a source of folks that I engage with. We're adopting SwiftUI or Swift Data, and where can we learn and talk with those outside of something like X, which isn't a great place to communicate a lot of the time. And I just want to stress that the Tuist Slack is the liveliest place. It's somewhere that you can go and just engage in the random channels or see what those folks are doing in general, and really get support and peace of mind, especially whenever you're like me, tasked with something dramatic like building a Greenfield project and taking the whole team through and making sure that's a great experience. So thank you very much for your time. And I know I had questions on here, but I think we're doing those at the end.
Hello, everyone. I'm Annie, and I'm here to talk about another type of twist. This is about careers. Has anyone here switched careers or their stacks? Okay, I see some people. Okay, nice. Okay, it's gonna be a group therapy. So this is about my story, switching from web to iOS here at Glovo. And a few things about myself before we start. So my name is Annie Chatsatrian. I was born in Armenia and moved here from Greece 8 years ago in Barcelona. I started working in Glovo 8 years ago as a front-end engineer, and I switched to iOS 2 years ago. Also, while I was here in Glovo, I experimented a bit on the backend. Today, what we're gonna talk about is about this process. And this is not gonna be a tech deep dive. There's not gonna be a demo. It's more about talking about why I did the switch, and then about comparing the two stacks, and then we'll talk about what AI got right, what it got wrong, and the learnings that I had as an engineer. And at the end, you will find out if it was worth it. So let's start with the background. So here in Glovo, in web, we use Vue, JavaScript, and TypeScript, and CSS. And I had to leave that behind and go to the world of Swift, SwiftUI, and UIKit, a bit less UIKit. And why did I do the switch? So in general, after 6 years of being a web developer in the same company, I had not a lot of challenges. I worked on a lot of websites, and I wanted to try something new. So, and also I had the curiosity about generally building UIs outside of web. So I thought, okay, it would be a good idea when they presented it to us in Glovo. Let's see, were my expectations the same as I wanted it to be? So let's see. In this image, we see how I was imagining the developer experience to be with Apple, having all these, their products were with the design, but the reality was more a bit like this. And let's go to why, starting with a small comparison of the two stacks. This is a big table, but overall you can see that the tools are kind of the same, and the areas, but timing is a bit different. No, you see a lot of things with seconds here, but with iOS, and we have time for coffee, an external contributor app at the App Store. But what I wanted to say in this slide is that things were transmittable, but the thing is that web has been there for 30 years. So a lot of these things, and they have a lot of documentation. So it was easy for me to learn when I started. With iOS, I had some trouble understanding when to use one state instead of the other. But also another thing to say is, like, I see things like async await coming from things in web. We had it for years. We're now doing a migration in our code base to this. And another thing that I noticed is Vue and React are kind of like a combination of SwiftUI. So those things are kind of helping the transition. But then I still had some shocks. Let's start with the tooling culture shock. And first, I cannot start with Xcode. So I thought, Apple makes the product, software and hardware. So they will develop a tool that will have the best developer experience. I was a bit wrong, even though it is very beautiful and has a lot of tools and a lot of things that you can profile everything. So that was surprising. However, it crashes way more often than I thought. I had to close and open it many times. And then there are, I think Pedro already mentioned it, we have some cryptic error messages. I thought I was an engineer writing code, but instead I'm trying to demystify why this error is happening. And at least now I know why the clean build folder happens. Thank you, Pedro. And then I won't dedicate this presentation to Xcode, even though I could. Instead, I will talk about other tools. And hot reload is one tool that I miss. It's coming from web. It's this thing where you're in development mode, you make changes, and they magically are applied. This doesn't happen in iOS, unfortunately, unless you use SwiftUI previews. But then keeping them up to date is an issue, right? Well, this face is my face when I saw the debugging hierarchy view, this 3D view of your app. I thought, oh, this looks very cool. I would, no, it's like 3D. But then trying to identify the SwiftUI view that I wanted to make the change was not as easy as I thought it would be. And then about testing. First of all, you have to switch your target and make another build to make it work most of the time. Then it takes time as the code base. But one thing that I found very interesting is when you have one file and you're writing your test for, sometimes the run button disappears. And I only see it when I close Xcode and open it again. I don't know. This was a mystery. Then another concept that we in web we don't talk about when we don't have it that much, it was lifecycle. So in web, the user loads a page, maybe does some interactions, the page reloads. So we unmount or mount views. But in iOS, your views have different lifestyles. So you unlaunch the app, they might disappear, appear, disappear. You might need to make sure you dismiss them correctly, because otherwise they will appear in the middle of another flow and the user will get stuck and they will have to close the app. So this was definitely something that I had to pay more attention when writing code. And I'm not gonna talk about navigation involving this. So let's go to the release process instead. On the left, you will see how we deploy to web, which is quite straightforward. We push to main, it might be an auto deploy, maybe you trigger a GitHub action, and the fix is usually in seconds deployed. The version is adopted instantly as the user loads the app. And if you want to roll back, again, you can trigger it with a click. And with the hotfix, it's the same thing. You can deploy right away the version with a new version. In iOS, it's a bit more complicated. You have some manual steps, but you can automate it. We have automated them here at Glovo. But then you have the external player, right? App Store that they have to review. So you have to pray that the reviewer is having a good day. And once they give the green light, you can release. Then you have the version adoption, which here we have a big difference with web is that people do not update the app as often, right? So for us, in Glovo, for example, we reach 80% after 1 week. And there is always a small amount of people that they never update the app. So if you're releasing a feature with that version, you'll have to make sure that you support it until a big amount of users adopt it, and then deleting that feature toggle is making it harder. So this mentality is very different than web. And adding to that is rollbacks. There are no rollbacks in iOS unless you want to ship the previous version with a new version tag. And for hotfix, you have to go again through the whole procedure of the review. And this release train difference makes a big shift in the mentality of releasing. Because in web, I was used to just pushing my changes and there will be a deploy. But for iOS, we release weekly here at Glovo, for example. So if you have a feature that you need to deliver, you will need to make sure that the release makes your changes make it to the release. So making sure, for example, for us, it's on Wednesday. So making sure your changes are there before Wednesday, it's a big shift. And that was something that I need to get used to as an engineer. Then let's go to another thing that is kind of different in web and iOS, the build time. So I knew that this was going to be different as I already had experience with the backend. And build time, you have to wait for it while Xcode is doing it. So you have to find new hobbies. So for now, for me, these are the things that I do while my code is building. I make tea because making that many coffees is not possible. I stare outside the window, I review PRs to be more productive. I browse on Slack, try to answer messages. I even meditate if it takes too long. But eventually what I learned is that my mentality from the hot reload of making a small change and looking for it, I need to unlearn it. Instead, I only build if it's necessary. And I try to invest in tests. And I also try to use things like SwiftUI previews if they're available. I also now know that I can use Tuist, so that's good. And as natural it was for me, I used AI as well during this transition. So some things that AI helped me was translating some concepts that I knew existed in web, in iOS. And then since my team owns some small parts in other people's code bases, I used a lot of cursor to be able to find where to make changes in those specific places. Also, as things like structural concurrency is not something that I knew what it was. I asked to explain it to me, and also the compiler errors. Sometimes it was able to help with. Things that didn't go so well with AI were it was generating a lot of duplicated code since it didn't have the context of the whole code base. It was creating methods that already existed. It was over-engineering, like adding things for comparing colors, for hashing functions or things like this. It was giving me answers from different technologies that I was asking for, refactoring the code even though I did not ask for refactoring, and also for a small change, making a lot of changes. So definitely there should be supervision when you use these tools. And the prompt that I used the most was this one. This should work, but it doesn't. Why? And this is something that mentally was saying to myself as well while I was going through the transition and with the stack switch. And switching to the more human side of this, I was a senior web engineer and I moved to a junior iOS. And I thought it would be similar, like as I was in junior web. But it was different because I had different expectations. And things I was not expecting for things to take so long or for things to not work the way that I was expecting it to be. So my emotional state was kind of like this. I was like, okay, this is a nice ticket. It's a one-pointer. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna make it. And then it takes me on the 4th day on like, why is this not working? And then on the 5th day, I finally found by asking my colleague or by doing a deep focus time. But then again, something else broke and I was not able to deliver the ticket on the 5th day. But then after a few months of this, things were getting better, you know. Maybe I was getting to the same curve, but the motion state, but things were, you know, taking less time, or things that I dealt with before, I was able to deal with again faster. So things were getting better. So from all this experience, I had a lot of learnings that I'm going to share with you. First, that I mentioned is learning and learning new ways of doing things. You feel like you find new ways of thinking from this, and you tackle problems in new ways, even though, I mean, you have new challenges that you deal with. And then you connect more with people, because you realize that not everybody else's job is easy. And you think that, okay, people who have made this switch have dealt with these problems. And then as an engineer, you level up, because you just are fine with not knowing and just asking questions. And you realize that your role as an engineer is not knowing a language specifically, it's more about problem solving. So you gain the confidence, and you're like, okay, any problem that comes to me, I will be able to deal with it. So after all this, do you think was it worth it? Well, hell yeah, it was worth it. So if you're considering yourself, I would definitely recommend you to do it. And if you have any questions, you can come to me during the pizzas. And that's it. Thank you all.